because of SAG rules, the lake has to be heated to like 80 degrees. So you can imagine in Vancouver when it's 20 degrees out and the water's 80 degrees, we have a lot of steam and atmosphere. So we end up lining one side of the lake with big fans. We roll camera and roll the fans, and like the actors would be racing against the wind, and then we'd cut the fans, and we would shoot long enough until then the steam would come back.
Hey, what is going on, Indy Mogul? My name is Ted, and today I'm here with cinematographer James Kniest, who is the DP behind films such as The Bye Man, Annabelle, The Conjuring, and specifically, we're going to be talking about the show The Haunting of Bly Manor, which is on Netflix, and if you haven't seen it yet, it's one of the best darn horror shows online right now. Today, to celebrate, we're going to be going through first the actual film as far as the camera, the lighting, the lenses goes, but we're also going to break into a couple of scenes and talk about the visual storytelling, and actually walk through and draw where the camera and the lighting went for each shot. So, ready to do this?
Let's do it.
Let's do it. What was it like working on the actual show?
It was great. We shot in Vancouver. The crew up there is amazing.
Yeah.
I took the show over halfway through for another cinematographer, Maxime Alexander. He shot like The Nun, he shot Shazam. He had some other project he wanted to go off and do. I had a relationship with Mike Flanagan and Trevor Macy. I was speaking to Trevor about another project, and he called me 2 days later and said, "Can you get on a plane tomorrow and come up to Vancouver?"
Yeah.
And so I pretty much did, and I walked on to right in the middle of one of the episodes, and the sets were enormous and just really well decorated and crafted. They wanted me to start right away, and I fought that a little bit and said, why don't I start the next episode? They finished out the episode. So it gave me a chance to get to know them, go through the script with them, work with the key grip and the gaffers and figuring out how they've been doing stuff, where things were. Kind of nice because I came in with fresh eyes. You know, these people have been working on it for several months.
Haunting of Hill House was hugely successful, amazing show, loved it. For Bly Manor, what did you guys choose for the camera lenses, and did you guys use any filtration too?
Yeah, so I inherited that package. It was Alexa LF Mini.
Nice. Yeah.
And it was the Arri Signature Primes.
Okay.
Which I hadn't used until that point. I found them to be amazing. I found them to be really sharp, very robust. They flared well when you wanted them to, and they didn't flare when you didn't want them to.
Yeah.
They had been netting the lenses, the special Fagal stockings.
Wait, pause real quick. Putting stockings on your lens.
Yeah. On the rear part of your lens.
Yeah. On the back part of your lens?
On the back part of the lens. The weave of the stockings of the silk isn't uniform. So the texture it gives the lens isn't uniform, which really helps hide it. And it makes lights bloom. Like if this was in the background, it would kind of halate and bloom. And
that's that look. When you look at the entire show in Bly Manor, you can see it. All the lights have that, especially the practicals. They all bloom.
Especially early on. Normally, if you go to DVS and you look at some stockings, it's really tight synthetic material. But the Fagals, you'll see it goes kind of like this, and one kind of goes like that, and one kind of comes over here. So it's really random, right? So you don't ever feel this pattern. I always netted it because it takes down the sharpness and kind of helps with the skin tone without putting something in the front of the lens, which becomes problematic with flares and fogging and all that kind of stuff. So this is another way to do it. Don't be afraid to employ some kind of lo-fi ideas in terms of the mechanical aspect and in terms of achieving what the lens sees, what the camera sees, and ultimately what the viewer sees.
Totally.
You can do a lot with very little.
Yeah.
Especially with a good grip.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. All right, let's do some scenes.
Okay, cool.
Okay, here we go.
This scene is when Henry keeps getting letters that are addressed to his dead brother. One of the things is he never really wanted to come to the realization and take ownership for the fact that his brother and sister-in-law died because of the affair he was having with her. So he has a lot of guilt that he's struggling with, and he's starting to drink a lot. And I think that's one of the important parts of the scene. And this is the setup for Dark Henry, which is sort of his alter ego. So it's the same actor playing both parts. We did this in a split screen kind of idea, and we didn't have really the time or the budget for a major motion control rig.
Sure.
So we found one called the Moses, and what it is, it's a repeatable head on sticks on dolly track that has a belt drive. So the two, the dolly track and the head interface and basically give you a motion control thing. You just don't have booming up, booming down, just regular dolly track.
Okay.
And then a platform dolly that goes here, right? And then there's an anchor here and an anchor here, and it has a belt drive that goes around
this is a big slider. This moves a platform.
It's just a piece of plywood. In this instance, the same actor is just on one side of the frame, and the other side of the frame we don't even worry about.
Yeah.
And so then he goes and changes wardrobe and comes back, and we just put him in the new position and repeat the same move.
How about the lighting for a scene like this?
We're on a stage here, and there's a trans light in the background.
Yeah.
This scene was lit with a lot with practicals. The idea for me was to keep it really moody and to use the background outside to kind of silhouette their forms. And then having this kind of bounce light from the practical lamp on his table, and then these puck lights being the only source of illumination. There are some kino flows, believe it or not, in the ceiling that are like barely on, if at all. Then there's a bunch of ladder lights, which are MacTech tubes or Kino tubes hanging down. There was very little space between the translite and the back wall. So this is a good way to do it. So these are tubes running with it, and they're just spread out all the way across the length of this thing. Then there's a piece of truss here going across all these windows, HMI 4Ks.
Yep.
Coming through here, each window.
Those
They were
boxes.
they were Arri Maxes, so they don't have lenses, but they have a really cool reflector. Over the actors, there's just maybe one Kino tube that's on barely.
It's cool. So there's that motion control shot in perfect time.
Yeah. So a lot of the light is motivated by these puck lights that are lighting the wall. I tend to use, like I was saying, matte lights a lot because they're very compact, they're really lightweight, low power. In this one, there's a light mat back here that's blue, giving us our little window push just ever so barely. Then there is a smaller light mat armed in that gives us a key light for him, and another little light mat here for the key light, and they're gripped onto the top of the cabinets. I think up here there's what we call a beaver board, which is basically a pancake apple box with a baby pin on it, and then here there's a little backlight just giving him a little glow on the top of his head. This is dark Henry, and you can see we let him go really dark on one side.
Lens choice for both these?
Probably in the 40 mil zone for these close-ups, maybe
Gotcha.
Slightly longer. The wider shot is probably a 28 mil. I tend to lean on longer focal lengths. I like the backgrounds to mush out a little bit so that the characters pop out. I also feel that like wide angle close-ups aren't that complementary to people's faces. It makes their noses look bigger, makes things look things. So that's my initial reaction is. And then there's times when we purposely use wide angle close-ups to show what's going on in the background more. Like again, it was a fairly lo-fi
I love it.
solution to it, you know.
Are you talking about the next scene?
Let's talk about it.
Let's do it.
So this is one of the ghosts that lives in the manor that died hundreds of years ago from the Lady of the Lake. And he's the faceless boy ghost, we called him. One of the interesting things about the ghosts that are stuck in at Bly Manor is their faces erode over time, almost as if they're being forgotten by the world. So this is when Flora chases him up to the attic and makes friends with him for the most part, and gives him a name and gives him a face off of another doll, which is really cool. And one of my favorite shots of the show is the mask over the camera lens that I just kind of came up with on the day. Like it was a fun thing, and it was actually really easy because sometimes working with kids can be really hard when you have to hold it exactly like this or exactly like this, and it actually fell together in one take, I think. Lighting wise, camera wise, this is the attic. And there's a little bit of a picture window here. This is where the stairs go downstairs. Over here, there's another kind of picture window in a wall. We have our two hanging practicals. In the rafters, I have these fixtures that are called light tiles, and they're basically fabric about this size. I think they're 2 by 2 each, and they have LEDs all in them, and they go on to different frames. We have 2 of them literally laying across the rafters right here.
Basically all it is you're hanging a top overhead soft light.
Yeah, there's a M18 I think out here lighting this window. Another one here, there's another window. This is has a diffusion frame that you can kind of see going up.
Is this opal or
It's probably 250.
250?
Oh yeah, and then I remember there's little tiny like 300 watt lights here just lighting the back rafters and just giving it a little bit of ambience, which I call room tone. We moved them around a little bit shot to shot.
Yeah. It looks like there's something on the back of her hair too.
I think that's just from the practical. This set goes this way, right?
Yeah.
It turns here, and then there's another picture window here. giving us the moonlight. And then here where all the dolls are, it was a sky panel through a 6x rag with the LCD, they're called light control devices.
Yeah. Where are the dolls in this scenario
Right
now?
in here.
Okay, so we have like a bunch of dolls here.
And then of course we'll have ciders. And I tend to we'll pinch them in way in.
Really? So these are what, like 4x4 floppies?
Those are,
like that?
yeah. And then there'll probably be a topper, a blade going across the top, and a bottomer. Almost always with every light. Box it in.
Really?
And after you work with your grips for a while, they know as soon as the light comes up, like good grip will see light go up, and they'll start boxing it. Cider, bottomer, topper.
Yeah.
And it just becomes second nature. There's a separate light there that's hitting the top of the mannequin, and then also carving her face out. There's nothing on the left side. If I remember right, there's a white card right here, bouncing back this edge light.
Close-ups when we see her, do we move anything to speeden them up?
Yeah, so what I would do in this instance, I would just take this key and just bring it around for her.
And then is it the same thing for the opposite side when we see the little boy?
Yeah, so we did all one side once, and then we
Yeah.
did, okay, let's turn around, and we move it all just for her side. Getting a look at the actors early on, so I know how each one kind of handles light. Like,
Yeah.
I used to kind of blow off makeup tests, like, but now I'm really looking at each actor to see what their strengths and weaknesses are and how to help them. I'm always looking for the eyes and the reflections, and then sometimes on chins for ladies and men, and especially camera angles. Like, there's a lot of cool angles that I love that are low, but sometimes it's not always that flattering for people. So I look for that stuff too, you know, and then usually I'll have a conversation with the director or
Say it's okay, it's all right.
You know, yeah.
Yeah. Last scene, you ready?
Yep.
Now, before we move on to our last scene, let's talk real quick about Hurlbut Academy. Now, don't get me wrong, film school is great for connections and everything, but sometimes you don't get to learn all the nitty-gritty practical techniques that every cinematographer needs to know. Things like false color or poor man's process or blocking with actors, lens filters, HMIs. If anything that I said sounds unfamiliar, what is cool is that Hurlbut Academy already has a video on it. And they actually have so many lessons on hurlbutacademy.com that they even split up the entire curriculum into different pathways. So, for instance, if you want to be just a gaffer, you can choose the lighting path. If you want to be just an AC, you can actually choose the camera department path. And it's all put together by Shane Hurlbut, ASC, who has over 30 years of experience shooting films like Terminator Salvation, Need for Speed, and The Babysitter. And they've even partnered with companies like Red, Tiffin, and Matthews, so you can know that the education that you're getting is industry approved. Now, if you want to get access to all this, you can get this by going to hurlbutacademy.com, signing up for an annual membership for just $30 a month, and getting 10% off, yes, 10% off, by using the discount code INDYMOGUL, INDYMOGUL, at checkout. So, again, thank you to Hurlbut Academy for sponsoring this video. And now, back to the episode.
It's our specs.
So this is Jessel, who was the first au pair, walking into the lake to kill herself because Peter Quint, who is Henry's assistant, has an affair with her, but he gets killed by the Lady of the Lake, and his ghost is stuck at Bly like all the other ghosts. And he is able to communicate with her, and he convinces her that if she kills herself, then they can live together as ghosts. They built a lake on a farm just outside of Vancouver. That's where they built the grounds for Bly as well. The actual manor itself was all CG. It was just 6 high storage containers with blue screen, and then a door, and then all the grounds, all the topiary, all that stuff was built on this farm. Because of SAG rules, the lake has to be heated to like 80 degrees. So you can imagine in Vancouver when it's 20 degrees out and the water's 80 degrees, we have a lot of steam and atmosphere. They ran the heater constantly, or at least a few days before we would be out at this location, for months. We ended up lining one side of the lake with big fans. We'd roll camera and roll the fans, and like the actors would be racing against the wind, and then we'd cut the fans, and we would shoot long enough until then the steam would come back. But because we had so much atmosphere, we started adding to it. We added ground fog, and it really ended up helping us in hindsight to obscure some of the problems we had in the backgrounds. But I think it just gives it a texture that really marries well with the digital age. So in this, we have this lake. Over here is the manor. We have camera angles here. I kind of committed to shooting the lake profile only from this way because over here is this big cannabis grow up with orange lights that are just lighting up the sky.
So this is a challenge.
And then here we had a barge that would float out in the lake with a 50-foot techno crane. And then here we had a little bit of a dam in the lake that would raise and lower, so that we only had to heat this part of the water column and not the entire lake. Here is a condor with a 125-foot condor with 2 Max 18Ks.
Okay.
And we used diffusion. It wasn't that big because of wind and all stuff. I think it was just an 8x.
Okay.
So sometimes we'd light the whole scene with the 18K just to give it some depth and some texture back there.
Okay.
We would have people coming in and out of the water here, a lot of it, day and night. And then this was always on dolly track. I always like foreground elements, and we would just move slowly through the cattails and stuff like that, just to try to give it some production value.
Yeah.
And then you see way in the background is where we added steam and fog to obscure stuff that we don't want to see, and to give it a sense of mood. We would telescope out and then dip it down. And then I had 2 HMI balloons that we just kind of moved around shot to shot.
Okay.
And that's pretty much her key light. And you can see there's a lot of fall off on her face.
Coming
And that's,
in
we're
from
looking
top left.
back at the shore. So this is another condor way deep and a lot of like atmosphere to hide the base of the condor. What's actually lighting the water in this particular frame is the backlit atmosphere, because you're seeing a reflection of it, you know? And water is a lot like black glass or something like that. Like you have to get that incident angle to find the reflection on there. Otherwise it would just be black and you might not even understand that it's water. You don't see the ripples, you don't see the water undulating because the reflection doesn't change. And I love some of the water work. We did the underwater stuff on stage.
It looks so cool.
And I think this is some of the most pretty stuff in the series.
Yeah.
And then we did a bunch of underwater stuff in black and white that I think is really pretty too.
Yeah. James, thanks so much for coming out and talking about the show. Again, guys, if you haven't seen Bly Manor, go check it out. It's on Netflix. Super amazing show. And again, some amazing cinematography and visual storytelling in there as well, too. So, James, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure.
Appreciate it, for
best of
sure.
luck.
Again, thanks to Hurlbut Academy for sponsoring this video. Learn advanced cinematography by going to www.hurlbutacademy.com and use the code INDYMOGUL at checkout for an additional 10% off of an annual membership. Alrighty, guys, thanks so much for watching. This is Indy Mogul, and of course, we will catch you guys next time.
On some of the night exteriors, I think we had 10 condors and balloons, all this kind of stuff. And I had been working on a Hulu series trying to stay in LA, and it was a fraction of the budget. And I had one lift with one light, and I had to figure out how to make that thing work. And it was almost easier having less than having all this other stuff, because you only have one instrument to use, and I have one 18K and one condor.
Indie people out there. Did you hear that? Having less is more.
Yeah, having less is more. It gives you more time. It just has to be well placed and calculated and thought about. Go to Home Depot, get 6 work lights, go over to Bed Bath & Beyond, get a shower curtain, and nobody knows what's happening back
People
there.
are
So
not
what's
gonna be able to
happening
tell the difference.
on the face and on the walls and on your product or whatever.